Hi everyone, welcome to this very unfamiliar and new kind of communication between you and me. As you know, we are not allowed to meet each other in person, so I thought I'd directly contact you through a video message because there's a few things I would like to say in terms of how we'll continue over the next few weeks. Hopefully it'll stay just a few weeks. However, for that period of time, I had planned to introduce you to the new, what is called Sternchen-Thema, which is the ambiguity of belonging, and I was compelled to give you a bit of an opening statement, what it actually implies and what it actually means. There will be 3 different modules in which we'll approach that matter. First of all is to discuss the topic in itself, which is the ambiguity of belonging. Then we'll watch the film Gran Torino. And as a third part, we'll look into the novel, or we'll just basically read the whole thing, which is called Crooked Letter, not ladder, crooked letter, please. So there's a first thing you can learn about letter and ladders. Those are 2 different words, so please pronounce it accordingly. So a letter is a letter. That being said, I would like to start by looking into the 2 terms, ambiguity and belonging. First of all, ambiguity implies that you are in a state where things are not very clear to you, that there are still very many open questions, that there's a lot of levels that seem to puzzle you, and things aren't very clear. And if you look at the opposite of the word, which is disambiguous or disambiguity, that's a state where everything's set, where it's very clear to understand, but it doesn't leave you any room for misinterpretation of something. So if something is ambiguous, it's something that's rather unclear and something that leaves you a bit in the dark because there's very many factors that need to be considered, or because you are ultimately trying to answer something that is very difficult to answer. If you don't know where you belong, then it's kind of an ambiguous state you're in. So it's not really clear where you belong to or which group you belong to, which brings me to the second word, which is belonging. That is much more faceted because we don't really know how to define the term belonging. There can be very many different aspects of, first of all, belonging by birth is defined. Actually defines, first of all, where you're born, what kind of ethnicity you are, or what color, or what social status you're born into. So those are all inherent things that you know you're kind of born into and that you belong to. However, as you age or as you grow older, life may change in a way that you don't really know where you belong to, and this can apply to also political views or the search for also, like nowadays, there's even a new aspect about gender, because in these days it's not even very clear or disambiguous which gender young people belong to. So that's not even clear. So we have very many levels at which we can look at the term belonging in terms of identity, social, political, cultural, or ethnic background. And that's something that will be analyzed over the next couple of weeks. With the example of watching Gran Torino and reading the book Crooked Letter. So, in short, the ambiguity of belonging tries to answer the question about where in this very open and very globalized world we're maneuvering about, and also we're trying to ultimately answer the question why belonging is important. So if you look at yourselves, you may notice that you feel you belong to a certain community, you're definitely part of a family. You may be part of a sports team, you may support a sports team, so you're a supporter, so you belong to that group of supporters. So everyone feels inherently compelled to belong to somewhere. So nobody wants to be outside, nobody wants to be alone, and that can be fulfilled in very many ways, be it through friendships, be it through family, being through partnerships, sexual relations, creating your own family and all those things. So if we presuppose that we are individuals who may create an individuality, but also create the need to belong to something else or to some other group or to another group of people, then we understand that that process can be very confusing and and has very many influences. So you experience this as young kids, as students. As the younger you are, the more you feel like you want to have good friends and that you don't want to be bullied, or you don't want to be marginalized, or you don't want to be neglected by friends, teachers, families, but you want to have the sense that people support you, that people like you for what you do, for who you are, for what you look like. So those are all elements that define, first of all, your identity, and through that identity, where you belong to. And that sometimes can be a very confusing state to be in. So in class, when we look at the topic, you will see that it's mostly the search for belonging in terms of cultural identity. So which culture do I belong to, particularly if I'm a foreigner in a different country, or if my parents are foreigners and I was born as a, let's say, an Asian in a Western country, or vice versa. There's also Western kids that were born and raised in Asian or African countries, so in entirely different cultures than your family background is from. Then you see that that there is some room for conflict and at least confusion and some puzzlement. And from there, the younger you are and the more you're trying to find your identity, you are challenged with finding out who you belong to and how you can fulfill this kind of longing to be part of a group, or be part of a culture, or be part of and just feel that you have a certain solid social interactions that have a positive impact on your personality, and a positive impact preferably on education and career and such. So your standing is pretty much who defines who you are and where you belong to, and that can be shaped by your decisions, but that can also be influenced by what other people think, and the degree in how far you let yourself be influenced by what others think is also something that can be analyzed and can be discussed. In how far is it necessary, in how far should you follow your dreams, or in how far should you follow expectations of family, parents, friends, I don't know, political parties, or whichever. So you can see that there's a high complexity of issues, very many levels at which we define identity and belonging, which makes it ultimately ambiguous. So we don't really know. We can finally ultimately answer that question about like who we belong to, where we belong, and what our goals in life are. So this is just to give you a bit of a framework, or kind of an introduction about what this topic will be about, and how the film Gran Torino and how the book Crooked Letter, both set in the United States, by the way, how they fit into that framework. So in the film, you will see that we're looking at a neighborhood in Detroit where there's a community of the so-called Hmong who live in Vietnam, and they live in a bit of a rundown neighborhood where there's predominantly Asian people and people of other culture other than white. And we have a white neighbor who's played by Clint Eastwood, who is kind of trying to more or less defend the old, like what Trump would call like old America, or when America was great. And you see how these worlds kind of collide, and how certain conflicts are either created or resolved. Now, that's Gran Torino, in case you haven't seen it yet. As far as I know, it's not freely available right now on either Amazon Prime or Netflix, but by all means, if you want to watch it, then please do. But we'll definitely watch it also in class, and I would prefer it if you did it like with my guidance and like under my instructions. And Crooked Letter is a crime story that actually dates back to a very long time before now, like a couple of decades back, where there's been a murder, and of course it's a question of who has done it, and about pointing fingers at people from certain ethnicities and all stuff. So those are all challenges that have that are inherently also American topics, given the fact that it's a nation of immigrants. So, or formerly immigrants, and now consider themselves American. And then, of course, there's a question: what's American and what isn't? So, those are all, like I said, it's highly confusing, but it's also highly challenging and interesting. So these are the three modules we'll be looking at: ambiguity of belonging, terminology, Gran Torino, and then crooked letter. And we'll start with just the terminology. And for that, I've prepared a few worksheets for you that I've put into our file or directory. Please don't delete it. It's happened already 2 or 3 times. I will just reopen it anyways again and just move the files. My files won't disappear, so I'll just upload them as often as I need to. So please refrain from doing that. Until I have something to tell you that I believe needs to be done in the shape of a video, then I'll let you know and I'll send it to you and upload it. For now, stay safe, stay indoors, don't meet each other, as you know, try and be responsible. And hopefully in a few weeks, or hopefully just a few weeks, hopefully just a very few months, we'll meet again in class, and then we can thoroughly address the issue of this topic, the ambiguity of belonging. Until then, I wish you all the best and see you again soon. Bye bye.